spirit. The Garrett Hill Coalition has been awarded a REN grant, which stands for Water Resource Education Network. This is administered through the Pennsylvania League of Women Voters. The title of our project is Managing Stormwater in Our Backyards, Valley Run, Radnor Township. Valley Run is a small tributary to Ithan Creek. This small creek originates near the Villanova University South Resident Hall complex off Ithan Avenue, and it runs through a residential portion of Garrett Hill and through Clemmacrone Park. The first phase of our project is a demonstration rain garden, which will be installed during a community volunteer workshop on Saturday, October 27th, and will be located at the west end of the parking lot at Clemmacrone Park. We present today the first public meeting with a focus on rain gardens, their purpose, design, and function. We are excited today to have a great set of partners to help educate and inform us to the benefits of rain gardens. We all know that the township has been experiencing some very severe stormwater events in the past few years, and we hope today to learn from what each and every one of us can do to help alleviate the problems with stormwater on our own properties. Together we can make a difference. I'd like to introduce our project partners now, if I could. Dr. Rob Traver from Villanova University. He's a Villanova University Center for Sustainability and Engineering and is director of the Villanova Urban Stormwater Partnership. Would you like to come up? I don't think you're on. There he is there. Okay, we have John Neisted. He's a restoration specialist with the Delaware Riverkeeper Network. Marissa Barletta, consultant to the Philadelphia Water Department. And we have Colin McCrossan, upcoming Eagle Scout with Bryn Mawr Troop 19. I'd like to say, just to add something about Colin and his troop. They've been helping down at Clemmacrone Park for many years. This is like the third Eagle project that they will be performing at the park. So we really appreciate Troop 19's help with our park, and they're really awesome. Thank you. We have several other partners on the project, including the Radnor Memorial Library, who've generously donated one of two. You see one rain barrel here. They've donated 2 rain barrels for the second phase of our project. Aqua America is a partner, the Garrett Hill Community Enhancement Trust, and Chanticleer Gardens. These partners are helping with technical advice, managing financial matters, developing website and publicity, taking water quality tests, and developing educational program for the community. We really thank them all. So now we'll start. Each project partner will have a 25-30-minute presentation, and at the end we'll have a little question and answer session that if you have questions you can ask of them. I'd like to start with Colin McCrossan, and he'll tell us a little bit about his project that's going to be coming up at the end of October. Colin?
Hi, my name's Colin McCrossan, and I am a Life Scout working towards my Eagle rank. I'm part of Bryn Mawr Troop 19. We meet in Bryn Mawr Presbyterian Church if anyone's interested. The project is an extension of the REN grant, which focuses primarily on the educational factor involved in rain gardens, but it will also serve as a traditional rain garden, which will help with flooding, erosion, and other factors that you'll hear about later in the meeting today. I'm going to speak a little bit about the resources I used to research native plant species, which are possible candidates that will go in the rain garden, and which can go in rain gardens if you choose to build one. Some various plants include butterfly weed, swamp milkweed, cardinal flower, bee balm, blazing star, blue flag, spice bush, and black chokeberry. Just various wildflowers and shrubs that attract native wildlife and help with the rain garden process. A great resource that you can all use is the website of the Philadelphia Water Department. They have great links there for various environmental projects, including rain barrel projects, rain garden projects, composting, great projects that you can all do with your family or your friends. They have a great link and tab that you can all use. It's entitled What's in It for You? there are various instructions on how to complete infiltration tests to make sure that your soil is adequate for rain gardens. They have other resources there, picture links, which are very helpful when you're building a rain garden. Other resources, if you just go on the internet, you can find great resources, obviously, or your local library. You can purchase these plants in any big box store or go to your local nursery, or if you want to ask around in your neighborhood if they have been to a local nursery that sells these plants. Those are possible solutions for asking about rain gardens. So thank you.
Thanks, Colin. Dr. Traver, would you like to start with your presentation?
Okay, sounds good. Hello, everybody. As a former resident of Radnor, it's kind of nice to be here. When I was a grad student, I rented a servant's quarters off an old mansion, which was kind of interesting. The children of the family liked to pull the cords or press the buttons and have it show up what room I was supposed to go to serve them. That was kind of fun. And I used to, when I first got here as a faculty member, I lived about a block or two up the road at the apartment complex. And obviously, I think we've been involved in Radnor Township through Villanova for a long time. Every time I know your rain gauge doesn't work, I get a call about sending some data in there, which we're glad to do. And we're going to talk a little bit about rain gardens and retrofits and a little bit talk a little bit about this and try to be as non-technical as possible. We have a lot of partners at Villanova. We've been studying this for 12, 14, 15 years. I started out as a young engineer. I worked as a township engineer for a firm down in Kennett Square. So I couldn't handle going to the township meetings because I was either the evil engineer who was stripping and paving and destroying the environment, or I was the person who was causing the houses to be much too expensive because of my stormwater management. So I gave up and became a professor. It's a much easier way of doing things. But we have a lot of people involved with our research. We're working at a lot of different universities, even international. These issues that are developing and hitting us on stormwater are hitting everywhere that it's developed in the not at the country but in the world. First of all, a little perspective. When I started out, we only looked at the 100-year storm and the 2-year storm, which is somewhere between 3 and 8 inches. Well, most of our rains falls in value in much smaller events, except recently, right? There's no such thing as a normal year, and we just start that off. We all know that. But generally, if I look at Chadds Ford, and this is actually based on, I think, 50 years of data, we usually get about 6 events greater than 1.5 inches a year on a long-term average. And we start taking a look at 12 events greater than 1 inch. So when we start looking at stormwater management, you have the flooding issues with erosion, the water quality, the temperature going into the streams, all that stuff adds up. My first 15 years of my career, or 20 years, we kind of forgot and missed most of that and kind of just blew that off, just not pay much attention to that. We only looked at the real big storms. So now we're kind of trying to look at both. For an example, this is a data from I got from the water department a while back, and I got to get this updated. But for 98 years of record in Philadelphia, if I capture a 1/2 inch of rain, about 15 or 20% of the storms by volume are a 1/2 inch or less. If I get the 1/2 inch of the bigger storms, I'm up to about 50% of the water in a year. If I jump up to 1 inch, I'm about 90% of the water in the year I should be capturing and doing something with. So if you think about it, if you're just looking at the 8-inch storms, you're getting a very small fraction of the water because those smaller storms just kind of pass through. So when you're looking at the perspective, and especially I now know there's always new regulations coming out, right? But for the townships have to do some catch-up and look at trying to retrofit for past sins. I guess you would put it. Getting a half-inch of rain is a good thing. So as a homeowner, if you're building a rain garden and you can just get a half-inch of rain off your roof, you're doing a tremendous amount of good. Now, of course, is that going to stop you for a hurricane of 10 inches of rain on your property? Probably not. But if you get 100 homeowners do the same thing, it is going to reduce the impact dramatically. So it's kind of a scale-type issue. And, one of the things people don't realize, in Pennsylvania, we didn't say this well at the very beginning, but most of the time, if you look up in the upper left-hand corner, if I'm looking at a wooded area, say, most of the water actually goes to evapotranspiration from the plants up into the sky. We don't need to infiltrate everything back into the ground. That's a misnomer. You probably don't need that much on every storm to catch that up. The main thing you change is when you put in the pavements, you put it all to runoff. What used to go to evapotranspiration, soak into the ground, now goes to runoff. So, the hard part is to make up the evapotranspiration, right? That's the hard part. And so a lot of the vegetated systems actually are good because they can do the evapotranspiration and the infiltration into the ground. And those things are I think, are one of the more successful ways of doing things. So first of all, if you're used to dealing with some of the Pennsylvania regulations, don't feel like every drop of water has to go into the ground. We don't need to do that. If you do that, you're doing a lot more than happened naturally. So it's kind of a combination of things. And of course, I love this truck. That's a firm in Maryland. When you cover it for asphalt, you're obviously changing the water cycle. And that's what we're trying to fix. At Villanova, we have a lot of projects we've developed. Some were paid by grants, some were paid by the university, some were done to meet township and state requirements. This is a little green roof we have on my SEER building, which is that was done by university without any grant money, just to kind of look at that technology and see how well that worked. And a green roof is going to be entirely the plants and the evaporation and the transpiration of the plants as they use up water. We have about 15 rain gardens now, might be 16. They're redoing some of the center parts of campus, and we have a couple rain gardens that keep on popping up. And some of these, and basically the one here with all those grasses is one that's now, I think, 12 years old. 12 years old, and for monitoring has no degradation of performance. It's still working as good as the first year it was built. So it really shows how these things can be long-lasting and be very friendly when they start taking a look at maintenance. This is a little bioswale. This is one in front of one of our Fettigan buildings. And by the way, I will say, we give tours all the time of our sites, and we're glad to do it anytime that anybody's interested. Just give us a holler and we'll work up something. We even got a few rain barrels, but our results are a little mixed on an institutional basis. I think it's easier on a homeowner basis than an institutional basis. We have a lot of porous concrete and porous asphalt sites that have also worked well. 10 years ago, the first project didn't work very well, but they're a lot different now. They seem to work very well. There's a porous asphalt and porous concrete right next to each other in one of our sites. I want to point out this little box here. That was on the plans when our Mendel building was rebuilt in 1903 after a fire. So that's a 98-year-old or older infiltration pit. So a lot of this is not new. We're just kind of rediscovering some things that happened in the past. You know how we figured out it was old when we first found it? It's a carved stone manhole cover. And I don't think they do that anymore. I don't think the Radnor Township specs required carved stone manhole covers or anything like that. But anyway, we also have a stormwater wetlands that we just built this last year. And this is before it filled in. You can behind, this is around County Line Road, behind our law school and it used to be a detention basin. And so that's quite a retrofit, but warning, we had water going through under drains all the time. You just can't make any detention basin into a stormwater wetland. But any of that, my favorite projects are the rain gardens because they are simple. They can be a very engineered structure to meet a requirement based upon a certain volume, or they can be in our backyards. One of my fellow professors, I think, has 3 of them in her backyard, that lives around this area. They started in the 1983, and Since then, we've been trying to figure out how they work. Like, for an example, there's very specific numbers here. 6 inches of mounded of water above the surface. That was a good idea at the time. Now we have one in Villanova, it's 3 feet deep, and I have one that's the one I just showed you that's worked for a long time is 18 inches deep. So a lot of these numbers, don't treat them as they're carved in stone, all puns intended. We're still learning how these things work. What we do know is they seem to work very well, and they also are very robust, so you don't have to worry about redoing it every couple years. And it's a very complicated thing from an engineering standpoint. We get evapotranspiration, inflow and outflow and chemical processes, but you don't have to worry about that on a retrofit project. We can simplify this and make it so we can have something that's going to give us some good and give us some benefit without getting into all these details. So, for an example, if I'm going to build a rain garden, and let's just go back a little bit here. Let's go back and look at this rain garden here. There are some components to it that are pretty obvious. One of it is you have to get water to it. Does that seem kind of simple? You don't know. I can give you a couple right down the road, not in this township, luckily, down a shopping center where they built some very beautiful rain gardens recently, except I don't know how any water gets to them. So one of the very simple things is the water has to get into the rain garden. All right? So you have to, and water flows, here's a test for the 3 up here. Water flows downhill, right? Okay, you passed. You know, the water has to flow into the site. And I got some pictures of some in a few minutes. You can see where that does not happen. In looking at it, the bowl part of it has a couple purposes. It holds the water temporarily to help it soak into the ground. It basically, we're going to get rid of a lot of the sediments and trash on that bowl. So you have to think a little bit about how dirty your site is and how much grit and stuff is coming in. If it's not that dirty, the plants and the soil will take care of it. You won't have to worry about it. In our site, we haven't touched the soil surface for 12 years. But it's pretty clean coming in. It's mostly student parking in the summer. They're not there. And so it's no big trucks. So it's pretty clean coming in. Some places, they'll actually have the water go through a grass strip before it gets into the rain garden. And that'll get rid of a lot of the grit and things like that. You have to worry about what happens if you have a real big storm. All right? Hurricane Isaac or any of these things. These are designed, we just talked about a 1/2 inch of runoff or 1 inch of runoff. Well, what happens when you get 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches? You have to figure out, it could be as simple as just making sure you have a nice grass edge that's flat so the water can overflow and make sure it's not going into your house, okay? Make sure you take a look at where that water is going. The media, and by the media, what we're talking about is not the people with little pads of paper at the newspapers. We're talking about this soil in here. That soil is an important part of the concept. We want a sandy soil. There's a lot of rules of thought. Some people use so much sand that the plants will barely grow. And that might be good in Philadelphia. I don't know if it's good in Radnor. I would use a much less of a sandy soil in here. 65%, 70%. There's a lot of different mixtures. There's a firm, we bought some from Mayfield Construction as a Mayfield Gardens. They have a bioinfiltration soil. It all depends because the plants have got to grow in this stuff, right? So you want those plants to be robust because that's what helps empty the soil from the water and also helps keep the pores so the water can go through that surface. Keeping through infiltration, process of removing stored water in the media. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The plants are, as I said, are critical. You want a good plant mass in there. Ours, we have a lot of different types. We have some with bushes. We have our oldest one has grasses, and what we do every year, we cut down the grasses in February and compost it like we do every other place at the university where we have grasses. So that's our entire program, plus we remove the soda cans and other cans and frisbees, footballs, and a few other things along the way. So if you want a good frisbee or football, come over and visit our sites. There's probably one in there. All right, here's our oldest site at Villanova. You can see the grasses in this upper picture. And so we have all this impervious area gets in either by overflow or by pipe. And so in this case, it's about 1 1/3 acres. It's 46% impervious. And so what we think about that is figure out how much impervious surface, multiply it by a 1/2 inch, say, or 1 inch, and that's our volume that we want to treat. It's as simple as that. And the reason why we're saying that is if I have 1 inch falling on grass, I should almost get no runoff. So we're just getting the stuff off the pavement. All right. The temperature effects should be cleared up going through. Oils and greases are broken up at the surface. I used to think I'd never build these next to a gas station. Now I'd want to build this next to a gas station. Metals get removed in the soil. A lot of chemistry, a lot of different stuff like that we can deal with. The plants help remove the water and the infiltration capacity as well. When I'm talking about that volume, in here, I would count the volume in that 6, 12, or 18-inch bowl, and also I would count, say, about 25% of the volume in the dirt, or the media, I guess I should use official terms, because that our study, we've done research with people in Maryland and NC State that show that that removes that volume every time. So it's not just what's in the bowl, it's also the volume in the dirt that gets really helpful. So, just a little, get past those. Here's how we built it, and there's proof, 2001. We dug it out. It was an island with an elevated island, quote-unquote wasted space. We dug it out. We mixed it 50% sand and 50% the original soil. Our infiltration rates are about 1/4 inch an hour, which probably would not be accepted at most places, but it works fine. And we planted vegetation found around the eastern seaboard. Why? Sandy soil. It's mostly dry, gets wet every once in a while. Hey, sandy plants, New Jersey, right? Go down to Ocean City. No, so we put it with sandy plants. We also did not think about it at the time, but the plants, if they're coming off a road surface in the wintertime, they're going to get a lot of salts, right? So they have to be able to handle that type of environment from the salts as well. I am an engineer. I am not a plant person. I talk to the plant people, and they tell me what to do. There's also some ways of looking at this. Original ones, they always had an underdrain. We have 14 in Villanova without underdrains, and we have no problems at all. The failure mechanism of a rain garden is the surface. It's not the bottom, okay? So unless it's built in a very bad spot, okay? So, basically, if it survives construction, in some ways you might think that we want to, if it fails, we want to rebuild it, right? We just don't want it to let it sit there. But, so an underdrain system, the main purpose is in case you're really unsure of what's happening underground. You haven't had a chance to do a lot of soil tests and things like that. The only problem with the underdrains is they release the water a little faster than I would like. Okay. So at Villanova, when we built ours, we have no underdrain. There you go, shows it coming in. A new way of looking at it is building what they call an upturn elbow. And what that does is makes it a little harder for the water to leave, keeps water in there to push it and give it more time to infiltrate into the ground, and also helps with water quality. Without oxygen, it helps to break down nitrogen. So that's a very handy way of doing it. I really should have that exit down a little bit. It can't be above, because that would not work that way. You were suggesting with an angled slope, which would also work, though it's not always easy to get the angle exactly what you want. So we like this underdrain. If you're going to homeowner, I wouldn't worry about it. The very worst what's going to happen, you're going to fill it back in with dirt. If I'm talking about an industrial site that I don't think we have very good people building it or really bad soils, I might put in underdrain. And Villanova, we didn't do any of that. but when we did our soil testing, we could tell from the soil it would infiltrate, even though it does it fairly slowly. So, how does it work? Well, the only graph and numbers I'm going to show you, the top coming down is rain, and the blue line is ponding within my system, and that dashed line is where water overflows at about 1.7, 1.8 feet. So in this particular case, we have all this rain. You can see it fills up, then slowly starts dropping. Then we have more rain, goes up, a little bit of overflow there, and then goes back down. The benefit of these is only about 6 or 7 times do we have any runoff leaving across the surface. Everything soaks into the ground. It's great for inspection, too. If you drive during the storm event or right afterwards, it better be full of water, right? A day or two later, better be empty. Got it. Your inspection program is done. All right? I try to keep things simple. Don't tell my students that. They won't believe it. We have a lot of them at Villanova. This is one that takes runoff from this building. And this is the rain garden here. And if it's taking runoff from the top of that building, I'm not going to worry about salts, am I? Okay, so if you start taking a look, how does the water get in? The downspouts come in. How does it overflow? Well, we put a little riser pipe and have it go to the storm drain system that's nearby. So very simple system. If we have a hurricane, the water is going to go over the grass and onto the roadway. So basically this is, and every one of my projects is a retrofit. All right. Well, I shouldn't say that. University, with some has built in some new construction, and they had to build it to meet the stormwater requirements. I now consider it a project. I didn't have to pay for that one, which I like. So it's, but here's another one. This is from University of Maryland, Alan Davis, a friend of mine. They had an existing island, so you can see what they did. They put a curb cut, and it's not, the picture doesn't show it very well. The inside is reduced, and so when it fills up, then it goes in the original drain. They redid the curbing on the top, and it's dropped down so the water will come in. So they used an existing island, they didn't have to take any more space, and was able to create a one. This is one from North Carolina. You can see, once again, it's taking rainfall from the rooftops. So I'm not going to worry about a lot of dirt getting in this, am I? This should last forever. If I take a look here, you can see the downspouts. It's going to come in. That is my overflow device. They still like that 6 inches in North Carolina. I'd probably raise it up. It'd be a foot at least, so you get more flow coming in. Some people will say you need to replace the mulch every year. They do that in North Carolina. We've never replaced the mulch at our sites. And a lot of people are saying don't mulch it after the very first time because that breaks down and that adds pollutants. So it all depends on how good your plant crop is and protecting it. Here's another one in North Carolina. This is a retrofit in a parking lot. So what they did was they took, and you can see they created these little islands. They used, this is a slot drain to bring water in, and water also come off to the surface. And they placed these over the old inlets. So they used the old inlet as an overflow device. So obviously this isn't your house, but you can do these almost anywhere. It's just a little bit of your imagination. Here's another one in Oregon, and more of an industrial site. So you can see they built gardens next to the roadway to bring the water in. I like this one, Auckland, New Zealand. I did not take this picture, but I have been into New Zealand and visited a colleague out there. Believe it or not, their weather pattern is very similar to ours, except it's reversed. So it's a friend of mine who graduated from UVA is a professor out there, and we share data back and forth. So it's, as I said, it's all over the world. This case, the inflow is pretty simple, right? Water just flows off the pavement and goes in. Outflow is, again, through a drainage system. All right, here's the bad rain garden. I'm not going to mention this is off 422 near Limerick, near where I live. I'm not going to mention that. I don't go to this Bravo Pizza place on purpose. But if you and by the way, this complex has a beautiful green roof, porous pavements, which are doing very well. All right, it's so I shouldn't say that. But what's the problem here? The slope is in this direction, There is the curb cut, so the water goes right past the curb cut and goes into the storm drain. So this is the only rain garden I know that's dying from lack of water. It's kind of sad. And what's scary is nobody's done anything to change it. That always gets my goat. If I'm a structural engineer and I don't build the building foundations very well, they're going to fix it. Water resource engineer, it's not built right, we'll just let it sit there. But now I'm going to get political. But if I take a look here, here's a picture during a 6-inch rainstorm event. See the water going right by, not going in. I don't know. Maybe the township had requirements. There are a lot of those floating around that the inlets have to be in the curb or something like that. But all they had to do is move that inlet into here and force it to be graded a little differently, and it would be a great design. And some of the rain gardens at the site are well suited. One of them, they forgot to put the curb cut in. So there's no possibility of water to get in. But this is early. This is lessons that people learn as you start a new industry. And this is a real bad rain garden. Why do you think it's a bad rain garden? Any ideas? It's not one. Why not? It's right next to a brand new building at Villanova. Well, the reason why is the law school at Villanova was built on a parking lot, so they didn't have to do much. So they ended up building a little detention pond. I have no idea why. I would have much rather taken sites like that and made them rain gardens. But I win most of my battles there, but not all of them. So I mean, that's the type of thing. And this is an example, and I think for a homeowner that actually this is a little bit more. I think this is a great example. This is in Burnsville, Minnesota. What did I say? Minnesota? Is that what you're supposed to say, right? They took a street. In every house in the street, they built a rain garden. It's inside the right-of-way. So the township did the construction and this dirt. The homeowners did the planning. The homeowners are responsible for maintenance. And this is well, 2003. So this is now 9 years old. I'm going to a conference out there. I'll see it in about 6 months and see how it's 10 years later, see how it's doing. Minnesota, a lot of winter, right? Cold. They use a lot of cinders. So their only construction is the township every spring goes in that grass strip and digs out the cinders. You're going to know if these aren't working, aren't you, if they're in the front of your house? The township doesn't have to worry too much about not meeting their requirements. They can easily see if they're working. There's a lot of peer pressure about keeping them pretty and the plants growing. And if this person turns out to be a nasty St. Joe's, I shouldn't say that, some nasty person who doesn't like green stuff, when it's in the right-of-way, the township actually has a legal authority to go out and fix it and bill the homeowner without going across anybody's property. The only problem they've really had that I know of last time I talked to somebody from this region was that the prices on the street have gone up, and a lot of the neighboring streets are very mad that they didn't do it for the whole township. So I really like this as a sustainable idea because it really kind of puts some of that stuff together. All right, and I've talked on way too long. I'm going to skip this. We're building a new site at Villanova. I'll just show you a picture of it, where we're going into a swale, into a rain garden, then into an infiltration trench, trying to put some of these together. But this is too much for a homeowner. But we like the idea of sequencing things, so it's just not one device to solve all the problems. And we do this because of maintenance and longevity and issues. But anyway, I'm going to stay for the next 2 talks, but I will be leaving right at 3:30 because I have to, mother-in-law and my nephew from Navy in Italy is all visiting, so I have to get back to that. But do you take a second or two for questions now, if you have any? Sure.
I saw you changed BMP to SCM. What's an SCM?
Okay. BMP came out of EPA as best management practice. And it kind of comes from the sewage treatment plants, where best available technology is being, we don't really understand this is the best we can do. A lot of people in the profession, and I was part of a National Academy study a couple years back, recommended we start calling them stormwater control measures because it's a much more engineered and understood process. This is no longer just building a pretty rain garden and not expecting results. What we found is you do expect results. These would do work. They will meet the requirements. So those questions are done. We still have some more understanding. But it doesn't mean pretty rain gardens isn't still a good term, especially for homeowners or projects like this. Yes, ma'am.
You were mentioning that you want the rain garden to fill up, and you also want it to empty in a certain amount of time. That's so we don't create room for mosquito breeding.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's water in the soil is not that as much of a problem for that. There's all sorts of different studies and different thoughts on this. North Carolina basically says if it's like 2 or 3 days, you're okay. The mosquito would have to land, have it hatch, and different breeds. Like if you look in studies in North Carolina, they have faster breeding mosquitoes than we have. Frankly, even our stormwater wetlands, we don't get any mosquito problems because of the biohabitat, and we have all the frogs and the dragonflies eating the mosquitoes. If it's sitting there for a week, that's way too long. So, basically, with that internal water storage, if it's going to go through and then out, you should design that. If it empties in 2 days, you're fine. There's also a lot of people get concerned about back-to-back storms. And there's just doesn't happen. We have had 10 years of data here. The chance of a back-to-back storm, so the second storm is going to be not as well treated as the first storm, is like 250-year storm, which is, it just doesn't happen very often. So, yes, sir.
Am I correct that, I saw 1 or 2 slides where you have piping underground. You talked about spillover and you've talked about a plug. Am I correct that all this water goes into the aquifer? Or is some of it piped out or none of it piped out?
Well,
None of it goes into the aquifer.
it really depends upon how you design it. As water goes through, the metals get taken care of in the first couple inches of soil. We had the one that I said was 100 years old at Villanova. We found copper elevated in the soil underneath. The biological considerations are all, and the oils and greases are all on the surface. Going through, what we're still debating a little bit is some of the nitrogen and phosphorus, and we're studying that. In fact, we've done some studies with that, and frankly, we're seeing it's about the same as underneath normal grasses. So if I look in capturing this, there's 2 mechanisms. One is infiltration into the ground, and one is evapotranspiration back up to the sky. So you get both. I can't tell you exactly how much of which, because we're still trying to figure this out. But a lot of the water is infiltrating. Now, does it go into the aquifer, or does it go into the base flow of the river systems? It's probably about equal. It depends where you are.
But you don't pipe it out anymore.
You can. Like this one, you see the pipe going up and then an upturned elbow. That would go back into my storm sewer system. So this is the case where I don't think I have very good infiltration rates, or I have no pure clay soils. All right? And so this way, the water is going to go through. Hopefully, it's still going to be infiltrating some into the ground. If I get too much, it's going to go out through the pipe. But so here, we're not as depending upon infiltration as others. This is the one that they used to do that I don't recommend anymore, is the straight pipe leaving. Because this, it goes out too fast and doesn't infiltrate as much. And you want to get some of that water back into the ground.
And lastly, what happens to all the pollution that's trapped?
Okay. Well, so far, that's in the surface. As I said, the surface layer is going to take care of the metals. It's going to take care of it's going to break down the oils into the nitrogen and phosphorus. The phosphorus bounds to the soil. And we've done a little study, and we figured out that the first 2 inches of soil is probably going to take about 30 years to be completely filled up. And then it's going to move into the next 2 years, a couple inches. Used to think, well, every 10 years, maybe we're going to have to take over the first couple inches of soils and get rid of it. And it's not going to be hazardous unless you have a smelting plant right above you or something. You can just throw it on the ground, put grass seed on it. Now I'm thinking it might be more like 50 years before you have to worry about that. First of all, runoff is really not that, is dirty when you look at the whole watershed. If you look at a little site, it's really not that dirty. I mean, it's, in fact, to get the measurements for our studies, we have to work much harder than any sewage treatment plant operator because the percentages are very, very low. So the good news is, and if you think about it, every 30 or 40 years, maybe you want to take a little bit off that top because of the salt buildup, because the plants aren't going to grow as well, maybe get a few extra sediments. It's basically also going to rejuvenate some of the infiltration capacity too. So far, I keep on looking at my sites and saying, well, if I wait, I'm going to see if I can take off an inch and see how well it does. But I haven't seen any change in performance, so I haven't done that yet. So I'm hoping it happens before I retire, But it's now the only site where we've seen problems is on infiltration trench, where the rock beds, when we had a very large area, very dirty area going into a very small spot. The normal ratios, they go about 10 to 1. We went 300 to 1. So it's every rain, we're getting a lot of, and the bottom of that's sealed very quickly, so all the infiltration is out of the sides. But the rain gardens, I mean, this stuff, nitrogen goes out to the atmosphere. So the rain gardens are very robust, and nature does a pretty good job as engineering, as far as I can tell. And I really like these solutions as much as I can. And frankly, if I can build swales, I can probably build this cheaper than I can the inlets and the curb and gutters. If I'm smart about how I do it. But anyway,
Burnsville fund the gardens.
what's that?
How did Burnsville?
I think it was I think that was a grant through EPA as a demonstration grant. And so they funded one street where they changed it, and they monitored another street where they did not change it. And you get about an inch and a half of rain, you have no runoff from that street in Burnsville. So I think it's a great idea.
I won't go too long on it. You mentioned the retention basin at Villanova that became a stormwater wetland, right?
Yes.
Did
No,
they-
that we rebuilt it as
You were excavating pipe and concrete out?
Yeah.
What kind of, could you
Yeah,
just-
basically there was an under drain. And so what we did was we chopped up the under drain and moved stuff around. That's all we did.
Okay, so it's not like, probably heard about the North Wayne Field one that actually has 48-inch pipe under the ground.
I have heard about it, but I don't know much about it. This was about a 12-inch, 18-inch pipe. And what we did was
Not
we...
a field of pipes that holds the water.
Oh, that's very different. That's an underground storage facility. This was an above ground. So, and basically, you're not playing ball there now. This is a swamp.
Oh, yeah, but we
Yeah.
have an underground storage facility over there, so if they were to change that to a wetland, they'd have to rip it all out.
You have to rip everything out, and it's not going to be a field above it. And, but you have to, and, we were very lucky. This was probably at one time in the 70s, it was built as a detention basin. And the flow underneath, they probably was the headwaters of a stream. Now you'd never be able to build it like it was originally. And so, we just ripped it out. Now we've rebuilt it again with a lot more complicated structure to try to take a look at how we can maximize treatment and pollution of it. And all these sites, we give tours all the time. I have seen millions of people from Radnor walking our grounds with their dogs pooping. So it's you can give me a call, send you a little map. You can or get on our mailing list, and we'll send you a note next time there's. Or if you all work out some kind of a visit, we're glad to have you.
Can you get council's presentations?
I can certainly. Well, they have my presentation because it's on this computer. Okay. You had a question, sir?
What type of sand would you use?
Oh, we just use concrete sand. It's very interesting. We did a little study on sustainability. If you use beach sand, you don't use as much carbon emissions. By the way, we're getting about a car a year in carbon emissions recovery. So if you if you're interested in that type of thing and you drive a car, you can either buy a hybrid like I did and it counts for 2 cars, or build a rain garden, and it's basically where it can be shown to reduce some of the CO2 as well.
What size do you
Well, oh, this is a little rough. I'll keep away from exact numbers. I mean, a lot of this studies are just, I mean, we're looking at what other benefits do we get besides stormwater? I know in the porous concrete, porous asphalt, they're very good for large solutions. You're not getting carbon sequestration. So you are getting that from the green stuff. So it's, they're trying to link it to other benefits like Philadelphia is trying to do. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a certain recommended amount of space between your home and the beginning of a garden?
There's a lot of talk about that. It depends. I mean, I would kind of think about it like a 45-degree angle to the bottom of the bottom of the bed is where the infiltration is. So I put it a couple feet away. I mean, if you're building a very large site and a lot of water and you have a basement right there, hire a professional. If you're just talking about a little bit of water off the rooftops, move it a couple feet away, and I don't think I would worry about it. Thank you.
No, it's great. I was glad you went first, because then I wouldn't have to talk about some things. All right, now I have to escape. There you go. Get out of here. So my name is John Neistat. Been doing rain gardens and sustainable items for a few years now. And it was a great introduction on the big picture and also a lot of the technical details. So there'll be some overlap, and feel free to ask questions while in the middle of it. I'll just start from just a big picture. I work for the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, and we do work throughout the Delaware River watershed, which is about 13,000 square miles. And right where we are now, we're in the Darby Creek and Dobbs Creek watershed. So traditionally, there has been reasonable infiltration and evapotranspiration, and because of a lot of the urban and housing, then there's a lot more runoff, and so that's what we're trying to deal with. And just as an impact explanation, when you get too much runoff flashy into streams, it just digs them right down. And what happens is you get to see a lot of the down-cutting streams. Sometimes those will go 15 feet down. A lot of impacts happen. You get a lot of silt just pumped into the ponds, and they start to fill up. Everybody starts to have to worry about dredging. It also sucks out groundwater right out of the ground, so it's bad for the woodlands if it happens to be going through. So I'll just touch quickly that there are different stormwater best management practices, and I'm glad there's like a new term for it now rather than BMPs. That's good. Examples are rain gardens and bioswales and infiltration basins. And they reduce runoff and improve infiltration and clean the pollutants. So I'll just skip right by there. And these are the two basic types of rain gardens. One is with the underdrain and one's without. So basically, the issue is at your own property, do you have infiltration allowable? So basically, is it clay soil and will the water not go through, or is it more sandy and it needs some help? So if it's a little bit of a clay soil, there's different ways to deal with it. Just pond less. In other words, if the infiltration is just going through just slowly, just put in maybe 3 inches of water for a rain garden. If it's a sandy soil, then it could handle more, maybe a foot of water that could be held in there. This is a diagram of just basically how to build a rain garden. If you have slope, dig it down here, fill up here, and the water goes in and then flows out. It's very simple to do. So this is just a basic cross-section. There's a rain garden soil mix depth, note there of 12 to 24 inches. But frankly, if the soil's good, you don't even need to do anything to the soil. This is an example of an under drain. Basically, that under drain has to be able to get out. So if there's a heavy clay soil, or there's just bad infiltration because it was filled or construction, then that's an important item. These are just some images of rain gardens. They can look like almost anything. This is a larger one. They can be square. They could be in between the curb and the sidewalk. And so I'll just get into some basic design considerations. If you have your house, you have a green area that's lower in elevation than your house in the pavement. If there is, or if you can dig it out a little bit, then you can put in a rain garden. Are the existing soils sandy and well drained, or clay and poorly drained? It's good to test the infiltration. Best way to do it is to dig down a little bit where you're thinking of having a rain garden. Say dig down about a foot, and then just start to test it. There's a couple ways to test it, and I have some links for a good way to do it at home. For the larger facilities, we hire engineers to do double ring infiltration testing. So there's also, what I also like to do is send out the soil for sand, silt, clay content test. So that would go to Penn State. Most people just think of a soil test. It's a second one, a horticultural analysis, which is nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and pH. But make sure to ask for the soil texture so you can get sand, silt, clay. It's not. It's like $30. It's not much at all. And it's if it comes back as a sandy loam, then that's good. Yeah. So the trick is to just add some sand to the soil, and make.
What percentage of clay do you have?
Yeah, you'll hear different things. Yeah, there's these engineered systems that are meant to meet a certain amount of infiltration that's coming off a new development, but for a retrofit, there's a lot of flexibility. So there's different studies that have been done, but believe it or not, somewhere around 10 to even 30%. Now, 10% is probably the most you want to go, but in some systems where it's doesn't, you would be able to talk to that a little bit better. All right.
Yeah, 10%. I would want much more than that in the clay.
Yeah.
And, some of the fast ones, they make about 85%, but it's hard to get the
Yeah.
clay to stick around.
Yeah.
So I would drop it down to like 60% or 60 or 70%.
Yeah. And there's new research that that 10% might be able to go higher.
15% I would go
Yeah.
longer.
Yeah.
What do you think we have in Garrett Hill and Oak Lane?
Say that again.
What do you think we have in Garrett Hill and
No
Oak
clue.
Lane?
We
Oh,
Well, I'm asking you.
yeah.
you sent it out.
We did send it out, I don't remember.
Maybe some of you think.
Yeah, I don't remember the percentages, but we have high clay.
We have high clay.
We have good drainage. But in our location, because it's poor soil, it's compacted, and, but I really agree, you have to test your own location.
That's
So,
right.
because that's not.
Everything's-
my vegetable garden.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
looking at it, I suggested like a 3-to-1 ratio, 2 of sand, 1 of the original soil, if you're gonna keep it. But it's
Yeah.
not just Garrett Hill, it's that specific location next to the stream bank, taking stuff off asphalt for a long period of time.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that's typical of the region, that's typical of that site, so it's not, I'd send it to Penn State. And also, don't send the surface, send it down to where the soil is gonna be going through. So I'd go down a foot, and
Yeah.
just sample like a foot down and send
Yeah.
that in. Sorry, dude.
Oh, no, that's good. And then the next basic question is, if it doesn't infiltrate, then is there some place for the drain to get out? Now, what I love about your solution is that you can pop that elevation up a little. But many sites that are just very flat, you just have no place for that drain to go. So you just have, it's really more important to get the infiltration going on it. There's a great test for do-it-yourself, phillywatersheds.org. And then for larger rain gardens, like I was saying, it's, we hire engineers to do the double infiltration ring. Colin found that do-it-yourself test online. There's another good website, rainscaping.org, and they have some good guidelines for sizing the rain gardens. And it can be done very technical, or just you understand your soil, you see it flood, once every 3 years in your backyard, it drains out. This is my rain garden. I understood where the water was going. I put in some pipes just to get it there. I dug it down about that deep. Put in a lot of native plants, which slowly died as the trees were growing because it got shadier. But it got some boxwood and some river birch and vestiges of the native perennials, and it works. The water runs off pavements, off of roofs, and it can really be that simple. This is I'm just going to run through the steps on a larger rain garden we just put in Haddon Township, New Jersey, at a Van Sciver school. So I'm just going to go through the steps here. There is on the left is the double infiltration ring that our engineers use to test the infiltration. And then further down, we dug out just to look at the soils to see how much clay is underneath. And we also tested the soils. It was fascinating. We found that we had different infiltration in different areas. So we had almost no infiltration, more like half an inch an hour, and then another area about 5. So we finished the decision on the design of the rain gardens based on that. We actually did some soil swapping just so that we could get good infiltration, because you also want to watch budgets, bringing in all the extra soil from off-site. Lots of times, this is getting more technical, but a standard set of engineering drawings will say, put in rain garden soil, remove 3 feet of soil and put in 3 feet of soil. I'm like, that's crazy. That costs too much money. I like to work with what's there. So that's what we did at this project. Meliora Design and Jonathan Alderson, landscape architects, did the project with my help. And we basically, it's a little hard to read the engineering plans, and I don't have a pointer, but I'm going to run up here. There it is. So the water goes in here, goes through these shallow rain gardens where the infiltration isn't very good, through the swale, and into some larger rain gardens where we pond about 6 to 8 inches. We could have handled more ponding, but the school just wanted to keep it a little bit low, so they were concerned about safety.
Can you quantify what you did here?
Sure.
How big is the site? How big is the
Oh,
site?
sure.
What did you spend?
Yeah, it's about, sure, you like the details, that's fine. It's about 15,000 square feet of area for the rain gardens, so about 10,000 square feet of actual rain garden bottom. And the purpose of it was to slow down the stormwater that was gushing into Sadler's Run, which is in the middle of an old growth forest. So we had a grant from New Jersey DEP. And this rain garden, the cost of it is $100,000 to put it in.
So, but what was the surface area that is going into this?
Oh, sure. Off the top of my head, I don't remember, but it was about 3 acres. I think the calculation we initially got from the engineers is a little bit undersized, because when we got a huge storm, we actually got some more runoff from further up that typically wouldn't get in. So the trick is, as Rob was saying, to design it to handle about 1 inch of rain, but to also handle the gushes that come through.
So it was 3 acres, roughly 3 acres
Yeah.
impervious?
Oh, impervious? No, 3 acres total. I would say about an acre of impervious, considering the pavements and the roofs and things like that, and there were actually some tennis courts coming in. So this is the area. This is half the rain garden that we're going to put in. And this shows some of the construction. Now, we made sure to use small vehicles so we wouldn't over-compact the soil. Now, in your backyard, you're just digging, but this is just an example. And some of us are interested in the larger projects. So this is, we had the water come in off 2 areas of pavement. And also, as it's downhill, what we did is we put in some mini berms. And that's quite common. Here, how we did it was we used this stone, which was also used for walkways. So they help pond the water just a little bit. So there's going downhill, we pond it, we pond it, we pond it, we pond it. This is during construction on half of the rain garden, the upper end. And there are some of those walkway berms, which we call weirs. What we did was it's basically very easy to turn subsoil into a good soil for planting just by adding compost. So that's the basic difference of a topsoil is just that it has, say, 5% organic matter. And that's a 5% dry weight, and a volume basis is about 15%. So say about 5-to-1 ratio of subsoil to compost just makes it into a topsoil usually. Of course, it matters what it is, whether it's, heavy clay. So just so we could use the existing soils, we just added the compost. It also helps with the initial infiltration and holding the water capacity. And as it breaks down, it's just very good for the soil. And this is where...
Township or the school district paid for this, and they were told they had to do something other than...
No. Yeah, it was the NJDEP funding. It's a 319H grant. And the school department,
I don't think Pennsylvania has...
that's federal funds, so that,
Yeah, 319 is out of the DEP. They used to have a growing bigger program, but...
Normally it's coming back. I don't know whether or not.
yeah.
But this program is PA 300. Our program is funded, so they're just not doing, I don't know if they're doing that scale of a project, but they're doing, and it will come back as we have to cover the expense of handling the water. This is a cost-effective solution.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it was great on this project. The school wasn't required to do it. We did solve a problem for them. They had clogged inlets and ponding in a bus drop-off area, so it was a hazardous situation when it iced up. It's also just we have a good relationship with the town, and so we were able to put this behind the school.
But I'm still
Yeah.
I want to understand the mechanics of how this came to be and somebody allocated money to do it.
Sure. Going back, Sadler's Run, we care about rivers and water quality. Sadler's Run goes into the Delaware River as it goes through Newton Creek.
On the river.
It's not, we'll see, we care about the whole watershed and care about everywhere. So Sadler's Run runs into Newton Creek, runs into the Delaware River. So as we're working on Sadler's Run, we study it, and NJDEP says, before you fix Sadler's Run with all this erosion, let's work on the stormwater of all the inputs that go into it. So we came up with this project to help reduce the gush of water into Sadler's Run, which erodes it. So that's how this, and then we look around town, look for opportunities for putting in rain gardens. They're all over the place. Basically, I bet Rob does that too. You're riding along and you go, you could put a rain garden there, you could put a rain garden there. You just need funding, so we were fortunate. Yeah, yeah.
And not to, this is kind of an oxymoron or whatever you want to call it, but some of the fracking money is supposedly being used to reinvigorate North Creek.
Yes, and we're in a quandary on that right now. Yeah, because we're very much against fracking. We're on an internal debate on that.
So
I
it's,
know that their project for Crone is Starry Creek, but where in between North Wayne or Gulf Creek. Is that part of your Delaware River Keeper?
Oh, yeah. The watershed includes all the way up to Schuylkill, all the way up into New York. It's a huge area that we care about. And frankly, I care about beyond that. As an organization, that's where my limit of caring is. So then, this is an example of some fabrics that if there's flow in your rain garden, you want to put down some fabrics to just help the flow. This is an example of right after we constructed it, we're halfway through planting it, and we had a very large rainstorm.
It always happens.
Yes.
I wish they would at least have the courtesy to wait for the plants to grow better.
Yes. And we had a huge storm. We had the inlet blocked off, but it just flooded through all this pavement, and it was a fairly large watershed on a huge storm. It's coming. That is the flooded roadway that we're going to fix.
And you guys, then that's the water that's going
Yeah, and that's the water that's gushing into it, and it's discolored from runoff that there was some kind of surface treatment on the tennis courts. That's why it's got that weird gray color. So it's gushing in. We have two locations, and right here is the actual inlet from the pavement. It's a little hard to see. This is a curb right here. We had this blocked off, so it rolled over the top of the pavement and right into our rain garden. Here it is rushing through our rain garden, halfway through planted. And that's the designed overflow. And it all held up. It was a great design. Yeah. Yeah, everybody was standing around going, wow, it works. Excuse me?
Do you remember what date this was?
Oh, I wish I could look at it, but it was just a little flash storm that was about 4 inches. It felt like 4 inches in about 1 hour. So it was a gusher. We haven't seen anything like it since. So it drained out, it worked. We could see that it was well designed right away. It filled up at 6 inches, and this is 1 or 2 days later we were planting. Nope, I'm wrong about that. We had a storm the night before of this that filled up this area and a little bit of that area. But this is what happened during construction on that large storm. So right after it, it filled up and was gushing over. It filled all the way up to the berm we have there. And then this is what it looks like the day after. And it infiltrated down well. And this is what it looks like. I did a before and after. I didn't show up here like 2 days later. But I have now, and it's judging a little bit hard. Once you get the plants in and the roots in, it infiltrates right. And also they were pumping out to do construction, so I couldn't judge it. But now they're not there pumping. And that's the before and after right there. This is what it looks like right now up top. It's almost the same view. And the water does infiltrate out after a couple of days. So we were very happy about that. It's a little hard to see here, but this is the upper rain garden. And that's the lower rain garden. So planting design considerations. How much time should I take for the rest of what I'm doing? 15 minutes? Okay. Just quickly, the planting design considerations are, is it sun or part shade? What's the pH of the soil? Is there road salt runoff? And basically, it's wet and dry conditions. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking it's a wetland and coming up with wetland plants. But really, floodplain species that are adapted to salt are just perfect. Yeah, and I'm also going to show you how to find them on your own. So I've got a gazillion beautiful pictures of plants coming up too, but I'm also going to show you how to find them on your own. Species that are listed as wetland, just don't bother with, but USDA has broken up plants into FAC wet, FAC upland, and facultative for their wetland lists. So generally, those are reasonable plants for a rain garden because they can handle wet or dry conditions. There's a lot of this. It's a very rough guideline. And plants that grow in the region are useful because then you know they're hardy. So basically, native plants from our region are great plants. the USDA Plants Advanced Search is a good way to find plants. So if you Google USDA plants and then find the Advanced Search button, you can pick different types of characteristics for your rain garden, and including inundation period, which is generally you want it about 1 to 2 days. And then whether it be sun or shade, what kind of soil, and it'll actually output a list of plants. I did this one for the Clem McCrone rain garden. So this is the output I did.
And you can search for salt tolerance,
Yeah.
road salt.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember if it was road salt, and I think it might have just. It's a really good question. It was about a month since I did it, so I can't remember if it said aerial salt or I think it said soil salt. So, in all of this, you'll look through this list, look through that list, and use your judgment on the plants.
And then nature will take over.
Yeah, that's right. And these are just some quick examples. I'll just start with the trees. The native sycamore will do fine. The pin oak, black willow, river birch, sweet gums. You can even get these without the sticker balls. Red maple, doesn't like salt necessarily. Box elder. You can't buy these, but you could move them. They grow everywhere like weeds. I put one in. What's that? Because they're too weedy around here, and people consider them junk trees, but they're native. And some people can't stand the box elder bugs if they infest your home. But it'll grow in a natural rain garden very quickly, and it's very fast growing. It'll grow about 2-3 feet a year. Black gum is a nice plant, salt tolerant, can handle wet and dry. Winterberry, these are just some examples of shrubs.
We have winterberry.
Yeah, that's good, yeah. Arrowwood viburnum. Switchgrass is an amazing plant. You can't go wrong with it. I have a list. Yeah, I have a list of where I've borrowed so many of these photos at the end, so I don't put the credits right underneath. Switchgrass, it likes sun, but other than that, it's very tolerant of heavy salt, no salt, inundation, no inundation. Its roots will just change up. It'll take over a rain garden. There's basically many of the grasses can handle salt. So, for instance, river oats, it's starting to be available in nurseries. Soft rush is a great plant for some of the wetter areas, swales, foxtail sedge. So there's so many different varieties of plants. And the background of what our meadows are is grasses. So if it's an open rain garden, open bioretention area, grasses are what it's going to want to be. And it's nice to put in perennials and keep it pretty, but it wants to go towards the grasses and grass-like plants. Cardinal flower, in a wet spot in the rain garden, might live. Turtlehead, that can handle it. I put it in, but it got shaded out in my rain garden, and nothing's living anymore. But it looks great for a couple of years, and over time things change. The Joe Pye weeds, bone sets. Now, people would think ferns would grow well, but it really has to be a shady spot for the ferns to grow well. Other than that, we just find on any new construction, the ferns they just slowly die or just barely grow, and other things grow quicker. But if it's in the backyard and it's in the shade, it would do well. And there are some that like a little more drought than the cinnamon fern. And think about year-round interest when you're designing it. For instance, blue flag iris in the spring and black-eyed Susans during the summer. Asters in the fall. Moss can be a component of a rain garden or your landscape. And then around the edges of a rain garden, one always has dry edges. So I'm just going to quickly flip through just some of the great trees that could be used around edges. So this is just showing that I wouldn't take out non-native plants right around the rain garden unless they're invasive plants. I'll just go back up to this, even a black cherry. It might be considered a weed tree or a junk tree. It's got great wildlife value. Quickly, Pinkster bloom, likes the sand, maple leaf viburnum. Now, you're probably wondering where to find all these things. The Pennsylvania Native Plant Society has a good list of nurseries. And some of these can be also found at the big box stores, but generally only about 1 out of 50 plants at, say, a Home Depot is a native. And half the time they're, well, I'm going to exaggerate. Sometimes they're mislabeled. I bought a native witch hazel at a Home Depot and it wasn't. It was a non-native. So these type of plants can be put around the edges of the rain garden. And even a plant like, this is a little blue stem, and you look it up and it likes the severe drought, it'll even grow in a rain garden. And also the Andropogon virginicus. Thank you, Rob. Which is a blue stem also, or a beard, Andropogon virginicus. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the common name on it. Even that plant, even though it's listed as more upland plant, just can do just great in a rain garden. Indian grass can handle a rain garden. Purple coneflower can. Coreopsis, Monarda, they can do rain gardens. There's the asters, and this likes a little bit of moisture. White wood aster just on the drier fringes of the rain garden. New York fern, this is one that would do fine down in the bottom of the rain garden too. It can also work in uplands. And I'll flip through these quick. No. Very few grasses will like the shade, especially native grasses. There's 1 or 2 oddballs like wood reed grass, which you could buy at a wholesale and maybe a specialty shop like Red Bud Nursery might have them. Mountain laurels for the fringes, and just a note, if you have the non-natives around, get them out so they don't invade the rain garden. So this is just 2 examples of devil's walking stick and Japanese knotweed. And put together a whole garden. Put your rain gardens in wherever you can. And here's a list of photos and maps that I used. And this one is, I'll leave this up. This just shows some of the locations on the internet that you can get information from, and also some native plant sources, like I mentioned, the Pennsylvania Native Plant Society. Any questions? We took care of plenty during the talk, so I think we're ready to go.
Be on the desktop. I don't see it. I see my presentation.
I'm not sure if you put the other one on there. I didn't know about the video. Was that on this?
Yeah, it was on the flash drive. It's no worries. Sure. So I sort of have a big picture. Where can we go with this? You know, what's the benefit of these stormwater control measures? You know, people thinking of them as individual disparate pieces of infrastructure, and what's the impact that they could actually have in improving a community? And I'm here to present the Philadelphia perspective, where we actually have a program that we're in our 2nd year of implementation of that includes more than $2 billion of the city's investment towards stormwater management infrastructure. I see a a cone. I don't know if that means it'll play. Ah, do we have sound? You know what? It's no problem. It gives a better intro than I could, but it's no worries. We have a few great videos. If anyone's familiar with Green Treks, the organization, they make really wonderful sort of storytelling videos. I gave a rain barrel workshop a few months ago where I used a few of them. They have produced for the water department how to install a rain barrel workshop video. They have our Green City Clean Waters story. They have a 3-minute sort of short summary, which I was going to show you, as well as I think a 10-minute really detailed story, but just gives sort of the overview of who is involved from various city agencies and what the overall goals of the program are. I think you can link to them from our website directly, which is phillywatersheds.org. What I'm here to talk about is the Green City Clean Waters program, which, as I mentioned, is the city's more than $2 billion commitment. It's a regulatory obligation for the city of Philadelphia. It's aimed at our Clean Water Act obligations, specifically our combined sewer overflow regulatory obligations. So the city of Philadelphia is split. It's a 60-40 split. 60% of the city is managed by what's called a combined sewer system, which means that the sanitary connections from your home, as well as the stormwater inlets in the street, are actually combined into one intercepting system that's designed to go to the wastewater treatment plant. But during wet weather, that system is designed to overflow that mixture of sewage and stormwater into our rivers and streams in order to protect the wastewater treatment plants. These are systems that are used all over the country. I actually have a map in another presentation that shows the numerous 50-plus cities around the country that actually have combined sewer systems. This plan represents the city of Philadelphia's plan for reducing the amount of combined sewer overflows that are going into our waterways over the next 25 years. We're the first city to actually use this green stormwater infrastructure approach as the backbone for meeting our combined sewer overflow obligations. And we're using this to meet our regulatory endpoint. The city of Philadelphia is uniquely positioned to undertake this sort of commitment because they're a drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater utility, which means they own the pipes, they own the conveyance system, and they own the wastewater treatment plants, which here in the suburbs is not the case. It's not the case for a lot of entities. It allowed the city the opportunity to work backwards from the treatment plant and see what they can do within system, and then with their brother and sister agencies using right-of-ways, public spaces, in order to implement the green stormwater infrastructure commitments to come out of the plan. And the other point I wanted to note is, as a stormwater utility, a part of the city ratepayer funds are actually going to stormwater management and conveyance. The Green City Clean Waters program has 3 main components. One is upgrading to our wastewater control plants, so over time their capacity will be increased. Another commitment is to lining the intercepting sewers along the Cobbs Creek and Tacony Frankford Creek. That's in order to reduce the inflow and infiltration from older systems and free up capacity within those pipes. And then the third major component is to manage the impervious cover from more than 1/3 of the drainage area within the combined sewer system. Oh, that looks different than it did on mine. There we go. This is an easier visual. So if you see the city of Philadelphia outline there, the area in sort of the darker brownish color, all of this area is the combined sewer drainage area. And sort of the tannish color is what we call the separate sewered or municipal separate storm sewer permitted system, which is what we are out here in Radnor. For those who aren't geographically familiar, we are probably somewhere right about here right now. We're on the western portion of the city. What's outlined here is the Cobbs Creek, and up here the Darby Creek. I think I have another. This map illustrates our outfalls going into our waterways. The yellow points are the stormwater outfalls going into our waterways, and the brown are where the combined sewer overflow outfalls are located throughout the city. And this picture I threw in to illustrate our challenge. Unlike the suburbs, there's not a lot of green space within our area to look for implementation opportunities. Rain gardens are certainly a tool in our toolbox, but we're looking at dense urban development, so we've got our challenges ahead in order to find the space to actually put our stormwater control measures into the ground. So the big question, how are we going to do it? We've sort of developed a three-pronged approach for achieving our goal of greening more than 1/3 of the drainage area. One is through what we're calling privately funded green stormwater infrastructure, which is being achieved through our stormwater regulations that have been in place since 2006, and I'll talk about those in a few minutes. There's what we're calling the follow the public works method, which means that any time the water department replaces any sort of piping within the streets and right-of-ways, they should be replacing those streets with streets that incorporate stormwater management controls, and the same would go for the streets department within the city of Philadelphia. And the last is what we're calling water department-led green infrastructure. That's where they're actually looking for opportunities, right now mainly on publicly owned spaces, but we're also looking at public-private partnerships, basically looking for large opportunities to implement regional control facilities and other sort of big green stormwater infrastructure. When I mentioned the stormwater regulations, here's sort of our measles map illustrating the areas that have actually come under the regs since they went into place in 2006. The stormwater regs in the city of Philadelphia were actually interestingly modeled after the Darby-Cobbs Act 167, which was completed back in 2004. It is available through the Delaware County website, I believe, the Planning Commission. But that established a first of its kind set of stormwater regs that actually not only worked for greenfield development, but actually redevelopment within an area, because a lot of times what you hear is pre versus post when it comes to development, and what this actually did was push people back to a higher rate of stormwater management. If you're redeveloping a parking lot, you have to do more than just replace it with the stormwater control that would have been on a parking lot. What we like to highlight here is that throughout the city, we're going to be achieving our green acres, which is our unit of measure for our program. And this will be coming to us right now for every development that comes into the city, disturbing an area greater than 15,000 square feet. I also mentioned that the city is, the Philadelphia Water Department is a stormwater utility, which means that they collect as a part of their water revenues a stormwater rate. That's been in place since the late 60s, but over the past decade, they've actually been working to update the rate structure, because originally it was in place using your water meter as a surrogate for what your stormwater rate should be, because that was the information that they had available. But through the advances with what's called geographic information systems and data systems and better understandings of what the actual parcels are made up of on the ground, they were able to go back and reevaluate your stormwater rate based on how much stormwater the parcel is generating. So what we have here are two sort of opposite side of the spectrum examples, where on the left you're looking at a parcel where the building occupies the entire parcel. It's going to be a multifamily residential. This is an apartment building essentially covering the entire site. Gross area is 24,000 square feet. Impervious area, 24,000 square feet. Previously, they were charged a stormwater fee of $4,700 a month because they occupied a huge meter for that many units within the structure, where this site on the right, it's 600,000 square feet, 500,000 of which were impervious. And because it's theoretically, a big box retail site, may have some sinks, a few restrooms, not a large meter, their stormwater bill was previously $400 a month because that's how the rates had been set. Now that site has been readjusted based on a gross area impervious area ratio to be a $2,500 a month stormwater cost. What we're hoping that means to our program is that a site like this with a really large parking lot is going to be interested in retrofitting and managing stormwater on site. Then we get additional green stormwater infrastructure, additional impervious area managed. That would be done by the owner of that site, so it wouldn't be at a cost to the department, and then they achieve a credit for that process.
That gross area and impervious area is square feet?
Yes.
Did they get the bill yet?
Yes. The phase-in has been since 2009.
So how, I forget that 600,000 and 500,000.
We need a calculator. I don't know, it's probably a 10-acre site or something.
Here knows that Radnor's doing this right now.
Okay.
The one on the left is happening, and the one on the right,
10, 15.
so 12 acres comes to, call it, but do the rough, right, the $2,500 a year, that's a yearly charge?
Yes, exactly. And if you go, if you went to our phillywatersheds.org website, or if you just Google the Philadelphia parcel-based viewer, you can actually take a look. The entirety of the city's system is on a website now where you can click on any parcel within the city and see what their stormwater rate is. So no, AMEC was our consultant that actually worked with our customer advisory committee to develop the phase-in, which right now they're actually working on a multi-year phase-in of the rate process. But the parcel-based viewer was created by another consultant to the water department.
Using probably AMAC data.
No, water department data. AMEC doesn't own any data. No consultants do. It's all water department. If you Google the Philadelphia parcel-based viewer, you could probably also link to it from phillywatersheds.org, but I'm not sure. And the other website, the official City of Philadelphia website, is phila.gov/water. And you can definitely link to it from there as well.
See, we have a lot of questions around this because the concern is as Radnor goes to put in a stormwater utility, there'll be a lot of pushback and whining about, oh, it's going to be so expensive, there's an tax. So
You had
we're
said.
going to need a lot of education about, look, if you have a half an acre lot that's 30% impervious for your house, you're going to pay $100 the most or whatever the
Right.
number is. We're going to have, it's going to be a long process to overcome that.
Undoubtedly. I mean, the city of Philadelphia has had a stormwater rate since 1968, and even with that, they've spent the past 5 years on education. So it's certainly understandable. It's going to be, a challenge ahead. But there's a lot of precedents, and AMEC is a firm that has helped to establish a lot of these precedents. So,
And you are getting that rate though because it's already included in the water bill, correct?
correct. Right now, it was a 4-year initially proposed phase-in. But what they actually ended up approving more recently is a cap. Now, I don't know if this was actually approved or not, but they basically put a cap for those that were most impacted by the bill, because there are some customers that saw their bill go up tenfold. So they actually put a 10% phase-in cap so that it would essentially stretch it out over a period of 10 years. When I mentioned following the public works, we're actually in the process right now of establishing a tool that will be useful, I think, to a number of municipalities. We're developing a Green Streets design manual that'll have designs and specifications for putting green streets infrastructure into the ground for basically any utility that's going to open up a street, especially when you're talking about curb-to-curb opening, which when the city of Philadelphia is doing pipe replacement for the water department, that's often what they do. It's not yet going to be used. We have a note in here about streets being resurfaced. It's not yet going to trigger this process for just a strict repaving or resurfacing of a street, but new streets going in and curb-to-curb openings ideally will be able to sync up so that every street that's replaced within the city is replaced using green stormwater infrastructure tools on top. The manual is in draft right now. We're hoping for it to be released publicly late this winter. Then under the umbrella of PWD-initiated projects, we're actually working right now on a number of strategic initiatives, partnering with our fellow brother and sister agencies. Green Schools is one where we're actually partnering with the School District of Philadelphia and the Department of Parks and Recreation and a nonprofit by the name of the Trust for Public Land. There's a program called Green 2015 where we're actually seeking to retrofit a number of city schools that are basically essentially big paved areas to provide outdoor learning spaces, classrooms, and green spaces within the communities. And these are some real examples that have been implemented in the past couple of years. Greenfield Elementary School in Center City and the Wissahickon Charter School in East Falls.
So will the PWD give them money to
We're actually doing design, contracting, construction, the whole process. And then O&M is actually built in after the fact.
stormwater utility?
It's funds from the water department. It all comes in as one bundle.
You immediately think Philadelphia schools are in bankruptcy, so how they
Right. And the other interesting thing is that the School District of Philadelphia is actually under a separate charter from the City of Philadelphia. They're not actually a part of the City of Philadelphia government. So as far as water department monies are concerned, it's like spending it on private property, which is how the Trust for Public Land and Parks and Recreation have been brought in as partners. So yeah, so it's a great program. It's a wonderful gateway into the community. It makes up about 3% of the impervious cover within the combined sewer area. So it's not that it's our biggest target in terms of land area, but we know that it's a huge target in terms of influencing the city residents and educating them about the broader program that's going to change the face of our city over the next 25 years. Green parks and recreation space is another big target for us. When we think about park systems, you heard a lot in the previous two speakers' presentations about managing impervious cover, and park spaces are typically green. What we like to think of these as are the bowls. If you can find the park at the center of a bowl, that you can disconnect the surrounding streets and impervious area to them without compromising the function of the park as it is currently, you've created an opportunity for essentially a low-cost or lower-cost retrofit of that space. So on the upper left-hand corner, this is Cliveden Park in, what would that be? Yeah, East Mount Airy, the northern eastern part of the city, where this park is sort of creating a bowl amongst itself. They were able to put a few baffles in and create some controlled wetland space. This area on the upper right is Liberty Lands Park, which is actually a park owned with an interesting structure by what we would call in the suburbs essentially like a homeowners association, where they were able to manage a lot of stormwater through a public-private cost share, and they've created a concert venue using this space. But the stormwater management function is not impeding their use. They actually wanted to create even more stormwater management capacity than we thought they would have been interested in.
Something they had to do to meet their runoff.
They did not. This was actually a voluntary project. It was an open space. It was actually an open space that they had purchased and wanted to prevent from future development. If anybody knows Northern Liberties, they had a development boom. This was one area of open space that remained. The people that lived there and owned the site wanted to create a space that could be housed by Northern Liberties, not more big development, and wanted to create a community amenity out of it. So no, this was not under any requirement. We did some cost share with them. Greening of public parking lots is a no-brainer. We see the sort of epidemic all over the place with huge underutilized parking spaces. A lot of them come from requirements through zoning codes where you're required to have X number of extra spaces because of those holiday overflow periods when those spaces may or may not be used. In the city, we've seen a lot of areas where once industrial is now not. There's a lot of parking that's just not necessary anymore, and sites that are now being hit with huge stormwater bills because of their former use and huge parking spaces. What we're now looking into is opportunities for depaving formerly used parking sites or retrofitting them with stormwater management capacity so that we help to lower the bills for their new stormwater rates and create, again, stormwater management opportunities. Right now, we're targeting the publicly owned redevelopment authority and City of Philadelphia parking lots, but again, public-private park cost sharing are things that we're looking into as we move forward. Green Homes is a part of our program that hasn't been formally enveloped into our regulatory obligations as of yet. Because if you can think about the logistics of taking credit on an annual report with your regulators for what's happening for an individual rain barrel on a person's home, it would be entirely too daunting at this phase of the game for us to be undertaking. But what we have done is to establish a homeowner's guide to stormwater management, which incorporates things like installation of rain gardens, rain barrels, downspout disconnects, and other tools for homeowners. Again, as sort of an education tool, but over the coming 5 to 10 years, we're going to be piloting a number of more structured approaches with willing homeowners so that we can see how we can tackle sort of that other 20% of the impervious cover that we want to be able to manage to see if there's low-cost opportunities. This guide is available on our website, and I think we actually gave a copy to Radnor a bunch of years ago to update and use on their own. So that's available for download. It's a PDF. When I mentioned that we're piloting a number of things, we have a program right now called Rain Check. This is also on our phillywatersheds.org website, where you can see sort of how we're piloting some of these practices at the individual residential level and how we're starting to track them and take advantage of whether or not this might be a cost-beneficial approach for moving forward with our program, as well as educating and outreaching to our community and bring additional resources to them.
In the utility, we can go back to that one. Say somebody says they changed their driveway
Mhm.
to pervious. How do you reassess for the utility charge each year? Take another
It's
snapshot?
It's an easier question to answer for the non-residential parcel. Non-residential parcels were individually evaluated for their gross area and impervious area ratios. Residential parcels, because they're fairly small and they could be sort of aggregated and group applied across the board, they were not individually assessed based on gross area and impervious area, and their rates are pretty low. So if you were to retrofit your site, your annual bill is $13, your credit may be $2. It's not yet in a place where it's about a cost benefit for the ratepayer. It's more about the benefit to the water department for that additional gallon of stormwater managed that we can take credit for. So that's why
How is it managed, for a large, 10-acre parking lot?
for a commercial partner. So if you're a big box retail site, a Lowe's in South Philly or IKEA in South Philly, their site is assessed right now based on the gross area and impervious area of the site. They come up with a plan to manage the entirety or some portion of their site. They have to go through the same process that they went through when they were going through their own development regulations. So they go and meet with our stormwater plan review group with their engineering plans and their proposal. Once approved, they go pay for the retrofit, install it, bring to us an as-built plan saying that it has been built. We give them a credit, they go into our data structure. They have to send an annual report to us saying that the system is functioning. We will do some number of spot checks across the city on an annual basis, but basically every 2 years, they have to resubmit their application to keep the credit in order for us to give the credit. But it's cost beneficial enough for them to do so in order to keep that credit going. So it's basically they have to file a piece of paper every 2 years, but on an annual basis. I don't know whether we're looking for a stamped letter from an engineer. I don't know what the actual piece of paper is that they have to submit, but there's data collected annually to ensure that it's still functioning, and every 2 years to say that they still have it and want to keep the credit. So it's a big administrative process. So you say Radnor's going to undertake it. I mean, it's big. I mean, it's going to be years and years of data collection and analysis and understanding and tracking and data systems out the wazoo. So within the Homeowner's Guide to Stormwater Management, I mentioned that there's rain barrel instructions, sort of how to install, what the benefits are, that sort of thing. What wasn't there at the time that we established it were our downspout disconnects, which is this box in the upper right-hand corner. We've actually been piloting a bunch of these in West Philadelphia and the Cobbs-Haddington neighborhoods over the past 2 years now. They're a wonderful, sort of more structured approach. From our perspective, they're a little easier in terms of tracking and taking credit if we go that direction over the long haul, because there's nothing for the homeowner to actually do. In order for us to take credit for a rain barrel, we need to know that the homeowner has emptied it within 24 hours after a rain event, where this downspout disconnector is going to be a little bit larger than a rain barrel, and it just empties on its own. It will have a soaker hose, it will have an under drain, and they can't really mess with it a whole lot. So these are a new sort of technique that we're piloting, and as we update the homeowner's guide, something like this will go in there. But I think we actually have a how-to on how to build this on our website separately. Rain gardens you've heard all about. I'll just highlight that these two in the bottom right-hand corner are from one of my coworkers' neighborhoods in East Falls. So it's not that the entirety of the city is that abyss of paved area and rooftop. There are areas with yards and lawns where possible we would love to see these implemented. It's just not probably the foremost tool on the residential property, although for big campuses and universities within the city, Temple and Drexel and UPenn, these will certainly be tools in the toolbox. Permeable pavement is another big one for areas, especially where they have small driveways within the city. It's an opportunity where you don't have to change the surface a whole lot. I know my house in Garrett Hill is 5 years old and has a paver driveway. Unfortunately, I know it's on top of clay soil, not any sort of an underbed that would have allowed for drainage. It's sort of a slightly more cost-intensive excavation and construction process, but if you're going for a stormwater utility fee at the end of the day, the credit may be worth your while. The environmental benefits at the end of the day are endless. We're looking at reducing stormwater runoff, protecting the banks. This bottom right-hand corner picture is of the Cobbs Creek about 14 years ago. And that's one of our biologists standing up against the bank there. We actually see this in just about every single one of our urban stream systems at this point. When we talk about managing stormwater on site, we're talking about reducing the erosive velocities so that we don't produce that anymore. This upper picture is actually from a restoration project at Marshall Road in front of the Cobbs Creek Environmental Education Center. That's actually just after construction. It looks much more sort of wooded and planted at this point. It's maybe 7 years old at this point, and it has withstood the test of time. We have had to go back and fix a couple of moved boulders and cobbles over the years, but it has withheld even for just being a small segment of restored area. But the other environmental benefit of these things is that each individual home that takes that first step, sort of just by having a rain barrel or downspout disconnection out there, is thereby educating their community, and the more of these practices we have out there, the greater the benefit across the board. And then, of course, there's the personal benefits. If you had a rain barrel, it could save you money in terms of washing your car, watering your plants, watering your lawn, all those other things. I don't need to go into that a whole lot for you all, but the personal benefits are there as well. I just threw in a bunch of photos that I can just talk about as we roll through. This is a rain barrel installation at the Albury Arboretum. It's been there now about 7 years and serving as a great education tool. This is one of our retrofits in the Cobbs-Haddington neighborhood. We did a mix of downspout disconnections into planter boxes and rain barrel installations. This is one of our downspout planters. You can see they're pretty sizable. We estimate they weigh about 500 pounds each, so it's not like they're going to be pushed away or vandalized a whole lot, but our pilot will soon tell. This is one of our favorites. It's just strictly a public education piece. It's a green roof on a bus shelter in the middle of Center City. It brings things to sort of the pedestrian level so that you can actually see it as you walk by, as opposed to most green roofs that are way up above the building and you can't see them. This is a retrofit of a park, recreation park area where we've created some pervious area. I had this picture in earlier. This is at Greenfield Elementary School, creating an outdoor play space and education, sort of outdoor classroom. It's a really cool installation of downspouts along the side of a school building where they were actually able to use clear piping in some spaces to illustrate the water draining down. There's the Kensington Kappa School in the Kensington area that actually connects to a bigger theme that they call the Big Green Block. And the Big Green Block is actually a cluster of about 15 different projects and partners that have come together to green a space. And it's just the ideal of what we'd want to see resulted at the end of our 25-year program. I have some images here of street greening. These are our sidewalk and bump out planters. This is our first porous pavement street, and Mayor Nutter pouring a gallon of water on it. This is Percy Street in South Philadelphia. This is a retrofit of a park that was essentially in the middle of a traffic triangle, so not really utilized by anyone, that we were able to retrofit a number of years ago into a wetland and now actually create additional park space for those who are able to access it. That's what it looks like during wet weather. It is. This is, again, Cliveden Park, and other. Oh, and this is a great one. This is the rooftop at the Comcast Center. So through the private redevelopment regulations, we achieved a number of green roofs in the past years. And this is the green roof on the Philadelphia Public Library off of the Ben Franklin Parkway. And I mentioned that there's a number of times that we seek to retrofit some park spaces and put back on top exactly what was there before so that people can still use the space. They're none the wiser about the greening that has taken place there. This is a retrofitted basketball court designed to manage stormwater through pervious pavement and underground storage. So the key here is that the community got a freshened up, cleaner basketball court, and we got a number of acres of stormwater management in the site.
Do you know how much pervious pavement is versus regular asphalt?
Right now, it's more expensive. I mean, I can't give you a per square foot. Probably. Right now, what we found is that the cost increase is really in the fact that the concrete and asphalt plants actually have to mix up a separate batch for each project. So the number of projects that we have increasing will bring that cost down, because right now they're having to stop their process entirely to create the new mix without all the fines mixed in. So that cost savings will ultimately be realized. But right now, we're seeing a high front-end cost.
And the city is doing this, not private?
Correct. And the city right now is assuming a cost of about $250,000 per acre of area managed. That's in our first 5 years of the program. We're seeking to bring it down to under 100 by year 6, 7, 8 of our 25 years. But we have about just under $2 billion over the 25-year period to put towards greening, but 9,564 acres to manage. Again, traffic triangle that's functioning as a rain garden, and then a rain garden, I believe this is at the Friends Center in town. And then our tree-lined view down the Schuylkill.
What is the cheapest way to get many rain barrels, if the rain gets down?
Order a lot at once. I mean, we have,
Like I heard somebody last week say, oh, I'm gonna drive to Norristown and $50 for a rain barrel. And in our neighborhood, most of the people don't care because they're not wet. So I don't anticipate any of them driving to Norristown.
yeah, I mean, there have been a number of workshops.
Well, yeah, it's just,
The Delaware County Conservation District may have done this years ago. I know Montgomery County did, where they were actually helping folks to make their own rain barrels. They were getting used like oil storage barrels, like food-grade oil, cleaning them out and putting the spouts on them. It was really low cost, but it was kind of a do-it-yourself. So your neighbor that wouldn't spend $50 likely isn't going to go build a rain barrel either. But if you were able to sort of sync up a partnership in a way where you could get a number of folks to build them and then give them out in some way, you could probably achieve that. We used Spruce Creek Rain Savers. We've given out well over 2,000 throughout the city. I can't imagine our costs have been much under $50 per. You know, there's what we call the city factor. Anything that the city purchases gets marked up 10 times over. So there's not often a cost savings in that arena. But if you're interested, I can look into some costs for you. But that, I mean, cost savings can be generated through just ordering bulk.
yeah, you said the Spruce Creek something.
Spruce Creek Rain Saver is what the city typically used. That's what our, that's our barrel. That's the brand of barrel that we've used.
Yeah, but what about the planter?
The planter box we're building ourselves. Our first cut at them was about $500 per, because they were buying pressure-treated wood. Even though we built it ourselves, we had our own designers out on site doing the management. It's expensive. Lumber is expensive. The process was expensive. But through this pilot, what they're actually seeking to do is to figure out a way where they can create a prefab mold, essentially, where we know what the volume is that we want to create within this system. Let's take it somewhere and see if we can have some made for us. And they would be plastic instead of wood or some other material, but we're a ways away from that at this point. But to build them, it was not cheap.
I wanted to just comment about the rain barrel. We have an arrangement with Do It Best Hardware. It is $60, I think, for a discounted rain barrel. They have sold over 70, I understand. So people do buy them, and that I agree that it's a harder. It's not a hard installation, but it requires annual maintenance. So, and also we will have a springtime program with rain barrels. We chose to do the rain garden and plant in the fall because a rain barrel will have to be put away soon.
Right.
So, I had one question about your downspout.
disconnects, do they require winter maintenance?
I don't believe that they are winterized through the disconnection of them from the downspout, but if you go to the website, there's the whole how-to on installing them and creating them, so there may actually be an FAQ on whether or not you have to disconnect them like you would a rain barrel.
Two things first, the Darby Creek Valley Association has a make-your-own rain barrel workshop coming up in, I'm sorry, I don't remember the date, but I think it's on, put it on the Radnor site, something like that.
Great.
I want to ask you about mitigation in that, when you're talking about a redevelopment of a site in the city, there is a mitigation option where a site is 100% impervious. They are able to actually pay for?
There's a fee in lieu, not yet a mitigation.
Okay, fee in lieu.
We have a fee in lieu that was established with the stormwater regulations at $5 a square foot. It comes up to just about $250,000 an acre, same cost as our greened acre. So that's what the structure looks like right now. There's a lot of evaluations in place, a number of things that our Stormwater Advisory Committee, a number of developers within the city are asking that the city look into, such as off-site mitigation or other alternatives to meeting the stormwater regulations for the sort of fully impervious landlocked sites. There are sites where it's just cost prohibitive, but thus far, we haven't given. You know, the city is holding people to, if you redevelop a site at 15,000 square feet, you either pay $5 a square foot or you manage on site. And they figured out how to do it. There's been, I think, one customer has taken advantage of the fee in lieu thus far.
And that's a one-time payment of the fee in lieu?
Correct. And operation and maintenance of private developed sites are the onus of the developer. So there's a deed-restricted stormwater management practice on site that is now a part of that site in perpetuity unless the site is redeveloped. They go through the stormwater regulations again and manage in some other way. But they're responsible for the maintenance. We have inspectors that go out and do a number of site inspections within a given year and permit cycle. And right now what we're looking at is sort of how's it working? Are they functioning? That's the bigger question. A number of years later, that it may exist. Are they blocked? Are they being properly maintained?
Thank you, Marisa. John, Rob, and Colin, we really appreciate all the information you provided today in regards to the stormwater rain gardens issues that we're confronting with. And I hope the audience appreciated their time and got some information to take home. Remember, we have a workshop, an actual installation of a rain garden coming up October 27th at Clement Crone Park. It's a Saturday, and we really could use the help, and really it's an educational workshop, so we'd love to have you all there, see how they're done. It's on a major scale, but I know we can get them to a homeowner scale and be able to all make a difference in our own yards. Okay, thank you for coming today.